Good evening, everybody. It is 7 o'clock on October 15th. Call to order the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee. Before I start, everybody who's online and in person, I wish you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving and you ate a lot and slept a little bit and enjoyed time with family. We'll start with our opening prayer. I'll ask Trustee Bruin-Ianika to do the opening prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Mary was always faithful to God's will. She was faithful at the stable in Bethlehem. She was faithful in the flight to Egypt. She was faithful at the foot of the cross. We should follow her example and be faithful to God's will in our lives. Lord, help us to do your will even when it is difficult. Help us to be like Mary and respond yes to what he asks of us. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ and your Holy Spirit. Amen. Mary, Queen of Peace, pray for us. In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you very much, Trustee Ianika. I'll ask Trustee Anisha Thomas to do the land acknowledgement.
We are ever thankful for the wonder and sustenance that our land provides us, for the food we eat physically, and for the spiritual nourishment provided by the beauty around us. We are also all keenly aware that the land, bountiful as it is not endless in its riches, and we work to be careful stewards of it, of all resources of one another. We acknowledge that and thank the Mississauga of the Credit, our treaty partners who have been stewards of this land for generations. Together, we commit to redress past injustices by working to dismantle systems that limit freedom and work, passionately and resolutely toward a place and time of collective freedom and fruitful interdependence.
Thank you very much. On to A4, approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover, please? Mover, Trustee Thomas. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. I failed to mention as well that our student trustees have all sent their regrets for this evening. Oh, as you saw, Bailey Klein. Thank you very much, Student Trustee Klein, for attending. So student trustees Gia and Rahim are absent. And let's see, is there anybody else online that's not? Thank you. We also have Trustee Luzia Rosario, Herman Valoria, Sean Xavier, and Mario Pascucci absent from this meeting. On to A5, any declarations of interest? Seeing none. A6, can I have the approval of the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee for June 4th, 2024? Trustee Daryl D'Souza? Question or?
Just one question with the first page of the minutes. It shows Stefano Pascucci Chair, Anisha Thomas Chair, Bria Corbett Chair. Anisha Thomas Vice Chair, Bria Corbett Chair, and Thomas Vice Chair. I don't know if something has changed there. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. Would you like to move the minutes with the amendments? Okay, Trustee Daryl D'Souza, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. On to Section B, any awards presentations? No delegations. On to D1A, regular reports, Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association. There is nobody from the association who represents us here tonight. On to D1B, any good news items? Seeing none, Madam Director.
Through the chair, and good evening. Before trustees this evening is the annual policies for review for 2024-2025. Just by way of background, on an annual basis, the Board of Trustees not approves, but they identify all of the policies that need to be undertaken in terms of review, sometimes as part of the regular cycle of review, or sometimes because there have been regulatory changes by the Ministry of Education. The report before you, which starts on page 16, identifies, proposes 40 policies that we will undertake review this year. Trustees also have an opportunity at this time to identify any policies that are not identified on this list that they feel that they would like to come forward as part of the annual review this year. I'm prepared now to take any additional policies that trustees have that they want to add to the list. Otherwise, if there are no amendments to this list, then it will be this list that staff will work to support trustees in undertaking the review for 2024, 2025.
Thank you, Madam Director. Trustees have any concerns or wants of adding policies for review? No. I also like to note that Trustee Luz de Rosario is online as well. Okay, thank you very much, Madam Director.
Through the chair, we're now moving to section G, which are reports requiring action. Policy 19, staffing, will be presented by Superintendent Strong.
Thank you. As part of Dufferin Peel's, through the chair, a regular cycle of review, the staff examined Policy 7. Policy 7 was a single sentence policy comprised of one line. The Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board shall make every effort to staff all schools with qualified, certified Catholic teachers. For trustees' information, this requirement is also contained in all of our collective agreements with our teaching groups. In 2020, we were required by a PPM with the ministry to put together a staffing policy, Policy 19. Embedded within Policy 19, we have embedded Catholicity all throughout the policy. However, we are seeking to remove Policy 7 and incorporate it into Policy 19. I'm happy to answer any questions the trustees may have.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions, Trustee Herman Valoria has also arrived as well. Are there any questions to this policy? Seeing none, we'll go on to the recommendations here. So the first recommendation is that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that Policy 7, teachers, be rescinded. I have a mover, please. Trustee Bria Corbett, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Number 2, that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that revised Policy 19, staffing, be approved and adopted as amended. Trustee Darrell D'Souza, thank you for moving that. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Through the chair, we now move to G2, which is Policy 11.01. This is going to be presented by Associate Director Del Bianco, Integrated Accessibility Standards, on page 26 of your e-agenda.
Thank you and good evening. Through the chair, Dufferin Peel was randomly selected by the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility to conduct an audit, specifically as it relates to our compliance with the Accessibility for Ontarians and Disabilities Act. And what the MSA, the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility, did is they took a look at all of our policies to ensure our compliance. And what they found was we were not compliant, specifically with one particular criteria, and that is that Dufferin Peel requires accessibility criteria and features when procuring and acquiring goods and services and or facilities, and that where this commitment is not possible or practical, Dufferin Peel will provide an explanation upon request. So what they've asked us to do, and they provided us a deadline of October 21st, is to take that exact sentence that I just wrote and embed it into our policy. And trustees will find it on the top of page 30 of their agenda package, exactly as stated and exactly as recommended. So the amendment to this policy is really the inclusion of number 6, which is the top page 30, which was a requirement by the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. Should you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. I have Trustee Bruanika. Anybody else have any questions? Online, in person? Go ahead, Trustee Unica, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this just in respect to the policy, or is it with respect to how we have our buildings as well.
Sure, through the chair. So theirs was specific about the policy, but by embedding it in the policy, we have to ensure that moving forward, anything that we procure has a AODA compliance aspect to it. So it'll be reflected in building design, and it'll be reflected in items that we procure.
Do they look at, or do they audit any schools to make sure that they are accessible? For example, if you walk into a school or just before the doors and you press the automatic door openers, do they automatically actually open? Do they do any of that, or is it just strictly, I thought I heard you say just the policy.
Yes. In this particular case, it's just the policy.
Okay, okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any other questions? Seeing none, go to the recommendations.
Through the chair, G3 is policy.
Madam Director, just one, there's
my
a recommendation here. Recommendation is that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees. Sorry, Trustee Unica, did you have a question? The Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that revised policy 11.01, integrated accessibility standards, be approved and adopted as amended. Trustee Unica, did you want to move that? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Go ahead, Madam Director.
Through the chair, G3 is policy 4.01, Catholic School Councils. Superintendent Raddick is on other board business this evening, so I'm going to present it. The change that is being brought forward this evening is to update the policy to remove any reference to the Dufferin-Peel Regional Association of Parents in Catholic Education, as the group no longer exists. All documents that made reference to that group have been changed. I also want to note that at some point this year, we will also be bringing an updated Catholic School Council binder forward for trustees. That's significant work that has to be done in updating that. I'm prepared to take any questions regarding the one change that is happening to this policy this evening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I have Trustee Unica. Anybody else? Go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, the DRAP-C verbiage, will that be changed to OAPC? Is that what that is now?
Through the chair, yes.
Can staff forward this particular report in an email format to trustees? Is that doable?
Through the chair, we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, carried. Sorry, seeing none, on to our recommendation. That the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that revised policy 4.01, Catholic School Councils, be approved and adopted as amended. Trustee Paula D'Amato Giovinazzi, do you like to move that? She will move that. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, G4 is policy 5.30, supply chain management. This will be presented by Executive Superintendent Chirapaka, page 53 of your agenda.
Thank you. And through the chair, as was just noted earlier, under the revised policy 11.01, the AODA desk audit identified a requirement to ensure specific statements were included in that policy, but also this policy, 5.30, supply chain management, that would ensure the accessibility and features are considered when procuring goods and services. So the very same line that was added to policy 11.01 has been added to this policy. And as well, we've added the 5 key principles to achieve value for money while following procurement provisions, and these are included in the BPS procurement directive, so we've included them in the policy. Those are the changes. I just want to note that there has been additional changes to the BPS directive, and so at a future meeting, we will be bringing this policy and the associated gaps back for further review and changes.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Mr. The recommendation that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 5.30, supply chain management, be approved and adopted as amended. May I have a mover, please? Moved by trustee Darrell D'Souza. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, G5 is policy 6.90, tax support. This will be presented by Executive Superintendent Chirapaka, page 59 of your agenda.
Thank you. And through the chair, this is a one-line policy that was put in place many years ago, as far back as 1978. And for the last many years, it has not been a practice to influence or encourage employees on the direction of school support. The board does, however, engage in an annual Are You Ticked program, which highlights the benefits of directing tax support to the Catholic school system, including how it supports the election for trustee process. The policy as is does not, following that policy, Dufferin Peel does not encourage or influence the direction of school support for any employee, and there really is no direct impact on funding for that tax support direction. So noting that, we are bringing this policy forward to be rescinded.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Trustee Darrell D'Souza?
So we are rescinding this policy because of the Education Act, or because we just feel that we should not send the Are You Ticked maybe to our students, staff?
So through the chair, the Are You Ticked program is valuable, and we do follow it on an annual basis. We're bringing this forward for rescission because it's not a practice for us to, when employees are hired or brought on board, we don't encourage them or direct them where they should have their tax support. The policy is telling us that the board should encourage employees, but that hasn't been a practice that's been done.
Correct, but does it not make sense to probably amend this policy and say that we do not encourage, but we do send Are You Ticked to all our staff and students, rather than rescinding it and saying we're not going to do anything? Because it does impact trustees' voting lists, right?
So through the chair, it's possible to do that if that's what the trustees would prefer. There is a communications plan which would involve the Are You Ticked program going forward annually. And one reason not to embed the name is it could change the title we use. or
When it
something.
changes, we'll see. But right
Okay.
now, if we are doing it, I think we need to do it actively, rather than rescinding the policy.
So through the chair, your request would be to amend it to say that the board does not encourage.
Yeah,
should-
however we send.
However, we do this annual process and Are You Ticked program.
Yeah, because if we rescind this policy and it's not there, then that does not, the board does not require to even send the IUTIC or follow the IUTIC program, because there's no need, right? It's not written. I believe we should keep this policy and amend it to state that we will send the IUTIC program to staff and students for them to, and encourage them, or not encourage, but at least inform them that they should use their discretion in terms of putting their taxes towards Catholic education.
Through the chair, can I ask that you allow staff to work on some wording around this that can be brought to the board meeting and presented there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, trustee Anika.
Mr. Chairman, this may have happened a number of years ago, and if I'm speaking on something that should be discussed in camera, I'm okay with it. But my recollection is a number of years ago that part of the bargaining that Dufferin Peel had with its teachers was that they direct their taxes to Dufferin Peel. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't remember what that outcome was, but at the same time, not every one of our employees is going to be able to direct their taxes to the Catholic board because they're not Catholic. So, you know, it was one of those scenarios, but I'm in agreement with Trustee D'Souza. We can't impose our desire onto employees. I get that, I understand that wholeheartedly. But we shouldn't discourage it. Not that this is discouraging it, but I think that staff works on something that works, you know, from a wording perspective to satisfy, you know, not giving it up, but actually not pushing it. Whatever staff comes back with, I'm just worried that all of a sudden people are going to move, and they're not going to check. And Trustee D'Souza is right. Impact is already wrong to begin with. There are people that have, in the same household, that have both kids attending a Catholic school, who the previous election were both Catholic, and this time one was and one wasn't. And they still can't explain why. But with all respect to Impact, there's a lot of things that they can't. Because even the parish priest, and one of my colleagues experienced that, went to vote, and they said, here's your ballot, and it was for the public system.
Through the chair, can I just probe with trustees to ensure that we're going to capture how we revise this policy as opposed to rescinding it? Is that perhaps maybe you broaden it, that it's not just about employees? Like, I wouldn't want a policy that says we don't encourage, but rather one that actually puts into policy an annual process, which is the Are You Ticked, which, you know, really promotes that widely, not just with our employees, but with our communities. So that's what I would like to take back and rework for trustees and bring to October.
Trustee Haney, do you have anything else to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Madam Director, we just don't, oh, sorry, Trustee Corbett, go ahead.
My apologies, and through the chair, Mr. Chairman, I like all of the suggestions that have been raised this evening. I think perhaps if it could also loop back with the role of the trustee in terms of being stewards of Catholic education, I think would be important to include in that policy.
Through the chair, we can do that. We'll work on some verbiage and bring it to the October board meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So, Madam Director, we don't, you just take it back for review?
That's correct. No action on that. It will be captured in the minutes.
Thank you very much. Onward.
Through the chair, G6 is policy 7.15, trustee honoraria and expenses. Executive Superintendent Chair Packer will present. It's on page 61.
Thank you. And through the chair, the policy 7.15 for trustee honorarium and expenses was brought forward just a year ago, October 2023, and it's brought forward this evening for some additional revisions. If I can draw your attention to page 65 of the agenda, I can highlight those changes for you. The first one is to correct language in 2.4B. We state that trustees will be supplied with a computer, a printer, a home phone, or a smartphone. And we also state that it's DPCDSB owned. And because we can't really own a home phone, we've removed reference to a home phone. And at the bottom of that same paragraph, we've stated that the DPCDSB smartphone includes a data and usage plan that's paid by the board. We've added section C in the case where a trustee may choose to opt not to use the DPCDSB owned smartphone that's handed out, and they would have the option to use a landline or their own smartphone device. In the case of the landline, an expenditure reimbursement can be claimed, and for the use of a personal home-owned smartphone, trustees would be reimbursed at the rate that DPCDSB pays for their own issued smartphones. So it wouldn't be a full reimbursement for anyone's personal plan. It would be the plan the board has at that rate. The next change that's been added is on page 67 of the agenda at the top. And this is to introduce a conference notification form. The form has a dual purpose. For one, it can be used as a planning tool for trustees. So when you're choosing to attend a conference, it gathers all your costs at one time. So registration, travel, meals, hotels, whatever the cost might be to attend a conference is all included in one form. As well, the notification assists the chair and/or the director, because either one of those would be the ultimate individual who approves your claims once you've attended a conference. So up front, it allows them to know the types of expense claims that will be made and an opportunity to discuss any concern or questions prior to the cost being incurred. The other changes in this document are just formatting changes. There's been nothing else changed to the content. Happy to take any questions on those.
Thank you very much. Before I take questions as well, I failed to mention that trustee Sean Xavier is online as well. He's been online since I believe the beginning of the meeting. Any questions regarding this policy? Trustee Bruno-Nica?
Mr. Chairman, if, in filling out the document, which I recall from the in-service, I heard the reiteration of the need or the assistance that it would have in completing it. If I don't know what the expenses are, like if I choose to go to a conference in Alberta for the sake of a location, and I do know that the conference fee is $700. Okay, I should know that because it comes with the package that, but how do I determine if there's gonna be a dinner, a breakfast, or not? Or do I just put in that entire lump sum of what is allowed, which I don't know what is allowed, but let's assume it is per day, let's assume it's $50. On there, 3 days is 150. Is that what I do? Like total 50, 50, 50? And then if breakfast, lunch, and dinner is done for 2 days, then it's just the $50.
Yeah, so through the chair, this is a similar process that all employees of the board follow. Normally, when you're attending a conference, there's an agenda and there's information available that helps you, guide you through some of the costs that are there. If you're not sure, we're always here to assist as well. But sometimes you'll see in a conference, say for example, OCSTA, most meals are included. So you wouldn't have to put anything there unless there's something near the beginning or end that had to be added. Other conferences, not an OCSCA one, like Religious Ed Conference, I don't believe any meals are provided for that one. So then you would put the full amount for the number of days that you're there. So it's not it doesn't have to be exact, but it has to at least point out, there's going to be expenses in this area. You did a quick view of the flights, it's going to cost about this much. So they're not exact, but it is a good tool to at least know your approximate cost to attend that conference.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any other questions? Mr. Souza?
You, Mr. Chairman, this smartphone changes that is being made to the policy. If I understand right, if a trustee wants to use their own smartphone, they will be paid whatever Dufferin Peel pays to the provider in terms of acquiring a new phone.
No, so through the chair, if a trustee opted to use their own personal smartphone, for the use of that, you would have your own plan with a provider. But we would only be paying what Dufferin Peel pays for the plan we have in place. So we have a data plan with Rogers, I believe, right now, and there's a monthly fee. That's what a trustee would be reimbursed, that rate only if they use their own phone.
Then Dufferin Peel pays for the cost of the phone too.
That's
So
correct.
that will not be reimbursed to the trustee.
That's right, through the chair. No, that's a DPCDSB owned device that we give to the trustee to use at the start of their term, if they so choose.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, move on to the recommendation here. The Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 7.15, trustee honoraria and expenses be approved and adopted as amended. I have trustee Sean Xavier who wishes to move this. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, G7 is policy 6.56, safety of pupils. Excuse me, attendance verification program. Superintendent Oda will present. It's on page 101 of your agenda.
Through the chair, policy 3.0 dismissal of pupils early included 2 sentences which were also covered in policy 6.56 safety of pupils. To minimize duplication, staff are recommending rescission of policy 3.00 as it has been incorporated into the newly named policy 6.56 student attendant verification program. Further, staff reviewed the associated gaps, Gap 502.16 and Gap 512. Both contain procedures related to safe dismissal of students. To reduce duplication and ensure all information is included in one gap, staff merged the information from Gap 512 into Gap 502.16 and are also recommending rescission of Gap 512. That concludes the report on this policy, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Trustee Bria Corbett, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. So just a question around, maybe this isn't the time, I'm not sure, and I can defer to Q&A at the end. But I've never understood why if a student is late or absent first period, and so I'm going to talk about secondary because it's a little different than elementary, but if a student is absent or late first period, parent gets a notification through the school messenger that there's an unexplained absence. However, fast track now to last period, fourth period of the day, student is not there, late or absent. Parent doesn't get notified until 6 o'clock that evening, which for me as a parent, that's potentially if school's dismissed anywhere from 2 o'clock to 2:30-ish in secondary, it's a long time until parents are notified. So I don't know if that's so much embedded in this policy or gap, or if it's something with the functionality of the student verification program, but is that something we can, and I don't expect an answer tonight, I just wanted to raise because I think it's something that's worth looking into if we can improve that notification system to parents. Because if from 2:30 or even 3 o'clock until 6, it's 3.5 hours where parents aren't aware the student was not in class. To me is concerning. A lot could happen in that time, but it seems parents are notified earlier on in the day if it's first period. So I don't know if that's something that we can take back.
Through the chair, we will take that back and see if we can shorten those notification periods at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Trustee Bria Corbett, anybody else have any questions? Seeing none, we have 2 recommendations that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 3.00 dismissal of pupils early be rescinded. Trustee Bria Corbett, like to move that? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. And Number 2, that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that revised policy 6.56, Safety of Pupils Attendance Verification Program, Safe Arrival, be approved and adopted as amended. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee.
I move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Luz de Rosario. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, G8 is policy 9.03, progressive discipline. Superintendent Oda will present this. It's on page 119 agenda.
Through the chair, policy 9.03, progressive discipline, responds to the changing nature of progressive discipline incidents, and staff have reviewed both the policy and the GAP 552. DPCDSB's approach to progressive discipline is compliant with the requirements of the Education Act and the PPM 145. Changes to PPM 128 necessitated review of this policy and GAP for compliance, and we also took the opportunity to review and update language throughout. The GAP is quite long, so I will walk you through some of the overview of the policy and GAP changes. On page 121 of your package, within the policy, point number 4 is an addition which indicates that DPCDSB recognizes that pervasive injustices negatively impact school climate and contributes to harmful behavior. All efforts shall be made within our DPCDSB schools to combat and address the lasting impacts of injustices, thereby making schools inclusive spaces for all students. On page 122, point number 7 within the policy also adds the addition of the definition of a balance of probabilities, which is what school administrators use when investigating and coming to a determination of progressive discipline for students. Moving on to the GAP. On page 127, section 4.1B, item 2, there is a change to the language the trustees have in front of them. On the second line of point number 2, the example should actually read pervasive injustices within that bracket, and that recommendation, if approved tonight, will be changed. Moving on to page 130, 5.1C includes the addition of language around the workplace violence program and our requirements to follow incidents within schools under that section of the Health and Safety Manual. This reference is also located in section 6.3 of the GAP, 6.3D on page 136, as well as section 11.5 on page 147. On page 136, my apologies that I've already referenced that one. Moving on to page 137, there's a number of charts in section 7 that reference section 306 and section 310 of the Education Act, which is where we find the codes and the language for discipline that we use for students. So these charts have been updated to ensure that the language is compliant with the Education Act. On page 141, there is a reference in section, at the bottom of the page, section C, where it indicates during a suspension appeal that there's a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. That should actually read to the Discipline Committee, so that change would also be made. On page 142, section 8 references hate incidents. This section defines what hate incidents are. It also very clearly defines what harassment is within the school structure. And it sets out the additional reporting steps that we have within our system to ensure that both the Associate Director and the Director of Education are aware of incidents of hate that are occurring within our schools, despite whether or not there's a suspension under section 306 or 310. Also still within section 8, section 8.3, there is a line that's been added that indicates that when responding to hate incidents, school staff shall respond and reflect on the intent and also address the impact of harm that has been caused to victims. There are a number of other references throughout this gap that have been changed just to clean up some of the language and provide clarity to our school administrators, ensuring some consistent practice amongst our schools in applying progressive discipline. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, I actually have a question. I'll pass it off to Vice Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Page 142. 8.1A. So it states there, actually, sorry. Just 1 second. I just have to reread this 1 second, please. No, it's there. Sorry. Please disregard.
Through the chair, you need to finish as the chair, ask if there's any more questions.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Trustee Herman Viloria.
On page 137, 6.5, which has been crossed out, but it says the principal shall prioritize impact over intent of the parties involved when making decisions regarding consequences. Could you explain what that means?
Through the chair, we've moved some of that language within section 8, and 8.3 still, I believe, covers that principals will reflect on intent, but we will always respond to the impact as it applies to students and victims.
I think what if I may help, in addition to wanting some clarification, from a technical perspective, if 6.5 is crossed out, that whole line should be crossed out because it's been incorporated into another area.
Okay, so that's been,
Correct. That should actually be entirely crossed out. I believe that it's crossed out under 6.5, but the line didn't make it all the way across
and it's now incorporated
in section 8, 8.3. But the reference is to principals reflecting on intent and responding to impact.
the intent of the perpetrators.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
It could be a difficult situation where you're trying to guess what their intent was.
Through the chair, can you let us take that back and see whether or not some better language might be more appropriate there and bring it to the October board meeting?
It's because you're actually trying to figure out what's going on in their own minds, which you'd be just guessing.
So if trustees are okay with that, we'll take it back and see if we, like, I can't give you the language right now. If I did, I would. But I think we need to do some reflecting on that.
I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Stefano.
Thank you very much. So back to 8.1A, I was reading it again, and why don't we have religion, Catholicism there, anti-Catholic rhetoric? There's Islamophobia, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitism, nothing but anti-Catholic.
Through the chair, we can make that adjustment as well.
Yeah, thank you. And the word creed is there, but just put religion and not put the other ones, or
Through the
is it,
chair,
or
we
is or is
could.
a requirement under the act to do so?
No, I don't believe there's a requirement under the act, but there has been focus on certain groups that are disproportionately impacted by hate speech. But let us take that back and see if we can do some language that covers that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Trustee Darrell D'Souza.
To that same point, to you, Madam Chair, the Ontario Human Rights Code includes just those 5 bullets that are mentioned in this policy?
Through the chair, this is language that is taken out, as Director Mazzarato has pointed out, that maybe have been more raised in recent years in terms of pervasive injustice. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, but these are points that have come forward and that we have noticed within our schools have marginalized particular groups and students.
So it can be expanded. if
Through the
required.
chair, yes, this is a board policy, as long as it covers requirements under any associated acts, including the Ontario Human Rights Code. It's a local policy that trustees can expand upon.
So, just for my understanding, the Ontario Human Rights Code has how many bullets like this? 70? 17? I mean, can staff just send that to me at least? If my fellow
Through the chair,
trustees
yes,
will-
we can include a link to the Ontario Human Rights
Please.
Code and
Just
issues
those
and
17
events.
bullets, not the code.
Right.
Code would be
Oh, I see.
1,700 pages.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Thank you, Madam.
Are there any other questions? No more questions? Madam Director, we're bringing this back to the board meeting, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. So no action is required this evening.
Okay. Passing the chair back to you, Trustee Stefano Piscucci.
Thank you very much. On to section H1, no notices of motion?
Through the chair, no.
Nope.
There's
On
no
to I.
notices of motion. There's no additional, we're at questions asked by
Questions asked
trustees.
of by trustees. Set our list. Trustee Ionik is on the list. Anybody else? See none, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the, what kind of triggered it was the section, trustee honorarium and expenses, section G6. The discussion about the phone triggered question that actually came up tonight when I was at a wake for Greg Kelly. There were 2 principals talking and said that they both turn their phones off, the data anyway, when they're up north on their vacation time. And both of them looked at each other and said, I have no idea what we can and can't do. Like, from what data they can, like, do they get roaming charges within Ontario? Outside of the GTA?
Through the chair, no, once you're in Canada, there's no roaming charges.
Maybe what we can do is send something out to the principals to say, this is what is, because I heard one of the principals say to the other principal, I mean, I was standing there. They were saying, I have no idea. But we weren't talking about board stuff. We were just talking about cell phone for whatever reason. But I mean, not that I don't believe, I know that there are principals that don't have a clue. And they may be turning off their phone when they go up north. Not that I expect them to pick the phone up. There's an issue, but they don't turn the data off when they're up there. You know what I mean? In case they may need it for whatever reason. So I think maybe even a 1-page note to them on even email, it doesn't have to be, or the director's meeting, the next one, the 23rd, I believe.
Through the chair, just for clarification though, if you're not on a Wi-Fi network, you're using up data. If I leave the Wi-Fi network this evening and now I'm driving in my car, I'm now using data. So maybe that's what principals were trying to articulate, is that when they go up north and they're on vacation, they're turning off their phones so that they're not getting data because they have no Wi-Fi network up there. And so they are using up data, and the data plan, while a generous plan, after a certain amount of data that's used up, it kicks into a different payment, different amount for the month.
Uh, I, just from an educational perspective for our principals, so that they're aware, because I can tell you, they are unaware. Based on the conversation
Sure.
between, well, there were 4 people in the area, but 2 of them were they weren't whining, they weren't complaining, they were just saying, I have no idea.
Well, we can send out another reminder, but I will say to you, we do send information out before breaks to all the principals, to
I see
everybody
them.
who has a board-owned phone,
I see them.
to let them so that they have an understanding of data usage, especially if it's, vacation, if they're going on vacation, they're going out of country, et cetera. It's not board business.
No.
We've also been very clear to our administrators that when they are on vacation, if they are taking the phone out of country, et cetera, then they will incur those roaming charges personally, because for the most part, if anything happens, we will either phone them or the superintendent will look after the issue.
Yeah, no, and they weren't disputing that. They get that. But they were just unaware what the plan entailed.
Okay.
And the key, Mary Ann, just like anybody, because I get those emails too, and I read them, and then I go, well, cell phone out of country. Well, I don't have a board cell phone, so there's a magic button at the very top. Either a garbage can or an X, and that's what I use. But to understand what the policy is, you have to read the email. That in some cases is a challenge. So if staff can raise it on the call, that way they're all there, whether they're listening or not.
Yeah, we can do a reminder, but even if you're in Mississauga, as soon as you're off a Wi-Fi network, you're now using up data.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Trustee Herman Valoria, go ahead, please.
Mhm. I'm sorry that I was late to the meeting, but I had a question about revised policy regarding staffing. Can I still ask that question?
Through the chair, you can ask the question, but it's been recommended to go to the board in October for approval. If after asking the question this evening that you want to, whatever you're going to vote, you can do that at the October board meeting. But you can ask the question.
I was referring to 7.8, but there's a line through that, but not through the entire thing.
Through the chair, this is on staffing.
Yeah, 7.8A.
Okay, Superintendent Strong.
Sorry, through the chair, which section are we looking
It's
at?
page 22,
Page 22.
7.8A. Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board shall make every effort to staff all schools with qualified, certified Catholic teachers. My question is, does this imply that after making every effort to staff and has been unsuccessful, that you are now allowed to hire qualified, certified, non-Catholic teachers?
Through the chair, what I would say is that has never happened. We have a requirement on our Apply to Education profile that requires all candidates to have a pastoral reference before their application would even be considered.
Okay, so that covers that then.
Through the chair, if it's the language every effort, it's been passed for recommendation this evening. What I would suggest is raise it at the October board meeting, and staff will be prepared.
Because if that's the case, you just simply say all schools all staffing for all schools shall be only for qualified, certified Catholic teachers.
Through the chair, we can't say that because the only occupational group, is teachers.
Through the chair, there's a second part of that that's quite important, and it's qualified. The reason that we have to say here, every effort to staff all schools with qualified Catholic teachers is, as you know, there are some qualifications that are very difficult for us to fill, particularly in the areas of technology and language. And at times, we are required to apply to the Ministry of Education for something called a letter of permission, which grants an interim certificate of qualification. So while not necessarily speaking to the Catholicism here, our every effort will be made to ensure that certified, qualified Catholic teachers are in our schools.
In other words, there are exceptions.
Through the chair, yes, but not to the Catholic component.
Okay, to the qualified, certified part.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Trustee Valori, are you done? Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Burek-Corbett, go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair. So my question is just related to item G2, the policy 11.01. So I have a school that has a lift, which is not ideal, especially in an emergency situation. Quite cumbersome to use. Only one person in the school knows how to use it, and that's the custodian. Requires a key and knowledge of how to use it. And if the custodian is away or on lunch or someone else is covering, then it's not used the way it should be. It's beyond inconvenient if a student has an injury or even for deliveries. And the office has the first aid stuff, which is also important and not accessible. Now, there is a way to get outside, but then it requires the student to go around the building to get to the main office, and obviously not ideal in the winter. A ramp would be better, certainly more accessible for everybody. I don't know if it's captured in this policy somewhere, but I believe the school was told they couldn't get a ramp because a student currently attending did not need one, which I have concerns about, just because in 3.4 we mentioned we're committed to increasing accessibility for persons with disability who study, who visit, or who work. And it's about identifying and removing recognized and unrecognized barriers. And I feel like this really is a barrier that needs to be addressed. So I'm happy to provide more information around the specific school, but my question is that accessibility requirement captured in this current policy?
Through the chair, not knowing the school or the specifics or if there's actual students there that require it, we make every effort to make sure there's accessibility standards built into all schools. They may not be the most ideal, and they may not be everywhere around the parking lot, but there's always some place from a parking lot to a curb, from the curb into the building, fully accessible doors, maybe not everywhere. We're going to be required to be compliant 100%. They keep pushing that deadline out because you can imagine what those costs are as we try to retrofit all the buildings. This is this is the Disability Act that we're trying to adhere. Sorry, Marianne. Just don't. Rhea and I are trying to make you just know.
Make a better door than a window.
No, I would never say that. So this is really for persons with disabilities and not for convenience sake if you break a leg or you have any injury that way. With that said, to your point, let's take a look at the school and find out what the circumstances are. Why the lift, why not, why a ramp, why not a ramp, and why the lift, and why only one person knows how to use the lift. Like there's a few, as you're going through the scenario, there's a couple of red flags that jump into my mind that we can probably address rather quickly.
Thank you, Associate Director, through the chair. So pertaining to this policy, are we covered in the language in the policy?
So the policy will state that, if a lift is required or mobility is required from one area to another, whether it's a lift, whether it's an elevator, whether it's a ramp, as long as there's something there. We're not as prescribed to say it needs to be A, B, or C. It's just that we need to ensure that there is some form of ability to move from the parking lot onto the curb, into the school, onto a second floor. And in some cases, we have to make every effort. That's the other thing that's very important, I think, that's embedded in the policies, that we need to make every effort to ensure accessibility. We provide accessibility, but it can't be kind of detrimental to the building itself. So for example, we can't, some of our older buildings, we just can't put an elevator in them, right? We can't. So in that case, we work with the school administrator to make sure that what needs to be accessible is in an accessible place on the first floor. So it's accessibility. When we build new schools, it's one thing, but if we're going back and retrofitting other schools, we have to build to code, and sometimes that's when you have really long ramps, or you have to make sure the slope is okay. That's why you have lifts instead of elevators in some cases. So we're covered in the policy, but it's not as prescribed to say it needs to be a ramp or it needs to be a lift, as long as there's some form of accessibility.
Some form of accessibility.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the clarification. I'm happy to send more information around the specifics of this particular case. Thank you very much.
Trustee Daryl D'Souza, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was, I had a call from a parent with regard to air conditioning in our schools. So I believe there's a report which is supposed to come out on air conditioning, or?
Through the chair, I believe it was a status update report on what we've done to date, and what is still outstanding for the buildings. Yes.
You know when that's coming out?
Oh, that was planned for the November ANF meeting.
Yeah, because this lady was a grandmother. I explained to her the situation in terms of what percentage of schools are air conditioned and what's the plan going to be. And she specifically said that I will follow up with you after the October board meeting once again. So she's not going to leave me. So I was wondering if something could come out, or I could speak to you on that specific school to get some understanding.
Absolutely. Through the chair, if there's a question about a specific school, we can reach out. We can go through what is air conditioned, what is not there, and what's the probability of it being fully air conditioned at some point.
Thank you. Thank you, Associate Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, there are no declared interest items. There is no in-camera session. Our next meetings are January 15th, 2025, April 22nd, 2025, June 3rd, 2025. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us online. And again, happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and move adjournment. Trustee Daryl D'Souza, all in favor? Seeing none, carried.